Have you tried your hand at doing some home remodeling and now you want to tackle doing some finish work to dress things up, but you don't know where to start and you might be a little bit intimidated by the idea of doing that? Then this is the video for you. I am going to walk you through the steps to do a basic baseboard installation down here in a basement area I've been working on using some oak trim. Along the way, I will share some tips here and there on how to make the job look better and be a little bit easier. Come on along as we tackle this project together. My name is Fred with Make This Your Project. Let's get going. First off, if the wall needs to be painted, make sure you do that before you put the trim on so you don't have to paint around it. You need to measure to know how much material you'll need to purchase. I had already done that in the past with some rough dimensions and bought the lumber I needed. Now I'm doing final measurements for the cuts I need to make. I had one leftover long piece. I bought 3 more 8-foot pieces, and I had some odds and ends to use in the small spots. I made a video a while back with these pieces to show how to properly prepare and varnish oak trim. A link for that video is included in the description below. Then I had to do some ciphering to figure out how to best use those pieces to cover everything I needed and not have any waste. Or worse yet, run short. As you can see, I've got a limited amount of lumber to work with here. I've got 2 pieces that are exactly 8 feet long. I've got 1 piece that's just a few inches over 8 feet. And I've got one that's already cut that's going to go down in the corner down there in the hallway. It'll fit in there just for taking a couple of inches off. And then the balance from what I use here will go in the other section of the hallway down there. So I got to figure out where that long piece is going to go, and it's probably going to go in this long stretch of wall here. What I did was I found my 8-foot mark along this wall, and then I confirmed that I had a stud there, which I do. Used my stud finder. I marked the edges of the stud and looked where that 8-foot mark falls within that stud, and it falls too far to this side. What I need to do is have a wide enough nailing surface here for that first piece to be nailed in solidly without getting too close to the end where I could end up splitting the wood. I need to get the nail in the body of that piece of trim over here. So instead of using an 8-foot piece, it's going to be the longer piece, and I'm going to cut that instead to 96 3/4 inches, almost to the outer edge of that stud here, 8 feet 3/4 of an inch. What I'm going to do is cut each of these pieces at a 45-degree angle on the end where they meet. And that will form a French cleat to hold this second piece in place. The important thing to remember is you cannot cut the 45 this way, the way these 2 pieces are cut, because there's nothing to lock this piece in with. Remember, it's going to be held in place by that French cleat. Otherwise it'll flop. I have no place to nail it. So you have to make sure that you get that 45 in the right way so that it locks the other piece into place, and it'll get nailed again where the next stud falls along this long wall. Very important thing to remember. That French cleat will hold that thing in place, and you need a good solid nailing spot. Here's where this piece with the 45 lands at that 96 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to have a good solid nailing area back away from the end. So I always consider when I'm butting 2 pieces of wood up together like this is how do the grains match up to the end. Now this is the long piece that I'm going to cut some off from in order to put on that long section of wall, the one I'm going to cut to about 96 3/4 of an inch. I want to know which of the other 2 pieces I should match up to that. Now, I don't have a lot to work with here. If I had a lot more pieces, I'd have a better option to kind of match up the grain, but I definitely do not want to match these 2 up. This grain is too much different from this piece. The color of the wood is too much different. So I'm going to go with this piece. It's not an exact match, but there is a flow to the grain. I've always been very careful about that. I actually look at patterns in the grain of the wood that I'm going to be putting up for trim, like the mantle on the fireplace, to look for interesting features and the flow of the grain. That just adds to the appearance of what you're doing. With all the baseboard pieces up here at the shed, I'm ready to start marking and cutting. I'm starting with this very first long piece we talked about. That's going to have that first 45-degree cut on the end. I've got it oriented in here so that the face is down, because the blade, as you can see, will turn upward into the face of the lumber, make a nice smooth cut. You flip it over, do it the other way, you'll have a rough cut on the face of your baseboard. You don't want that. I made my mark on the back side here. The distance we talked about, I actually added just a little bit to it. I made it 97 inches to make sure I had a good nailing surface. And then the blade, I set it so it engages to make sure I cut on the outside of that line I have marked here, not the other way around. Be careful when you're setting your saw up to be sure you do that, or you'll end up cutting the piece a little too short. With all of that set in place, I am ready to start cutting. I did a test cut, and I'm still a little bit too far that way on the line. I always err on the side of cutting it just a little longer. Now I know I need to move it about maybe not quite a blade width over, clamp it down in place again, and we will be ready to cut. It's cut. Let's take it down and see if it fits. Problem I have is I have a teeter-totter here. I pinned the other end of this against the wall because this piece is a little bowed. I used a jug of water and a brick to hold it in place so I could do this checking, but I have a teeter-totter. I have a spot along the wall that's very high. This is a concrete floor in a basement that's had some work done to it to put extra drainage in at one point, and a couple of the spots are pretty high. I am going to have to mark that and take my block plane and clean that up a little bit so this thing lays flat across the floor. A lot of this sort of stuff is eyeball work. I guessed where I needed to make the curve in here to make it fit over the top of that tile. Got a starting mark and an end mark over here, and what I think I need for height, at least to begin with. Got that drawn in with a marker, and I will first hog that big chunk out using this saw right here. And again, the blade is set so it cuts down into the face rather than tear it, and then I will shape this a little bit with the block plane. Let's get this thing cut. Take my small block plane and start working this down to smooth it out. Get the contour I need. That's a start. I'm sure it's not enough. I'm going to take this down, test it, find out how much more I need to remove. Keep working at this till it fits like a glove. After that first trial fit, I saw a couple spots where I needed to remove quite a bit more material, so I got out one of the bigger planes, and it's capable of doing a little bit better job of that. And I worked my way along to open up some of those contours a little better down there and up towards this end. As you can see, it is able to remove more material. Then to contour it in, take the big belt sander with a fairly aggressive grit. I happen to have a 40 grit on here right now because I'm trying to hog the material off. We'll take it down, give it another try, and I'll take the small block plane with me now for some fine tuning till we get this thing where it needs to be. I'm only going to do this once, so I might as well do it right. After a little more touch-up with the block plane, I finally got this thing to fit like it was supposed to. I made a pencil mark to get the dimension I needed to cut the other piece to length. With that piece cut, I pinned everything in place against the wall to double-check the fit at all the joints, and it looked pretty good. I varnished the bottom of the piece that I had contoured so that it wouldn't wick water. The varnish I put on the bottom of this piece is all dry. I let it dry overnight. I've got everything set in place and dry fitted. The pieces in that hallway leading to the office didn't require any extra fitting. They dropped right in. I cut them to length and they are ready to nail in. And that's the next thing we're going to do is grab the nailer and get this stuff put in and get this job done. To mark the nailing points, I find the studs using the stud finder. And then in the middle of where I get the reading, I take a Sharpie and I just put a small dot right where I need to drive that nail. And of course the other nail will go at the bottom. And you want to get that nail in the meat of the baseboard. There's a hollowed out section on the back. You don't want to drive your nail in there. You can split things. You want to get it in this solid section here and then along the bottom on this solid part of the baseboard. This dot will disappear when you drive a nail into it and then eventually put some nail filler in behind it. I found that to be the easiest way to do this, and it doesn't make a mess. It's too hard to work with a pencil. You don't want to draw a line on the wall up here. You got to get rid of that. Just put it right there on the baseboard or any other trim that you're nailing in. I'll be using this battery operated nailer, it's finish nailer. It's something I picked up when I was working on the rentals, and I have on hand for small jobs like this. When I did this entire house, I had a couple of pneumatic finish nailers that I used, a large and a small one that I hooked up to the air compressor, but that's too much hassle when you've got just a small job to do. These things work great. I'm using a 16 gauge galvanized brad with a nail gun to nail this trim in with. The trim is about 7/16 of an inch thick and the drywall is 1/2 inch. That gives us about an inch. That leaves me 1.5 inches of penetration into the stud that's behind the drywall, and that will hold it in place. Before I start nailing, I make sure I've got a full charge on the battery pack for the nailer. If you don't, sometimes you don't drive the nail in all the way, and then you've got to tap it in with a hammer and drive it in the rest of the way with a nail set. And that's no fun with this type of nail. Everything dry fitted, I'm going to push this first piece in place. It's good and snug against this other molding. I'm going to find my mark for my first nail. I'm going to hold the gun so the nail is flat. It gives you less chance to split than if you hold it this way, the wide way. Hold it in place. We've got our first nail in. Catch the one on the bottom. And we are started. Catch this end piece now. A little tricky here, but we'll get it. I had to do that at a bit of an angle to catch that stud. We are off to the races. I'm going to get the rest of this long piece nailed, and then we're going to take a look at how I handle those short pieces in that hallway by the door to the office. Notice my French cleat is holding this piece tightly in place. We're down to this tricky spot here by the office door where I have these two really short pieces just over a couple of inches each. I don't like nailing stuff like that because you can oftentimes split it right in two when you try to nail it. There's just not enough material there. So what I do is I put those in with construction adhesive. And as a tip, if you ever wondered about these little caps that you can put on a tube of construction adhesive or caulk or anything else after you've used it, do they really work? Well, I checked this, and this centuries old tube of construction adhesive, liquid nails that I have used on various little jobs is still good. So let's put a little on the back of this thing. And I'm just putting it on the high spot there. Put a little on this piece. No sense putting it in that little recessed area on the back because that doesn't make contact. Set this wider piece in first up against the trim here by the door. And you can see this pretty snug fit here. Get it worked in, slide it a little bit so the adhesive works its way in. You always want to do that. Set this piece in. And obviously I want to do that before I nail this outer piece in. Otherwise I'd have an awful time trying to get it in there. Work that around. This piece is going to lock everything in place essentially. So let me grab the nailer and get a couple of nails in here. I know I've got stud right here on the edge. There. Everything's secured, locked in place, and I haven't split these small pieces. Everything's going to look fine. Get a nail in the bottom here, one on the other end. And we'll finish nailing this, and that'll be it. This corner, we ended up with a really good fit with that 45-degree cut on each piece. And with that, the baseboard is installed. It looks pretty good. That wraps up this video. If you found something useful in this video to help you get started on your own project at home, well, please click like and consider subscribing to this channel. Make this your project. I thank you all for watching. Enjoy your projects and take care.